Can I make a song where every creative choice is determined by RNG? I think? RNG stands for Random Number Generator, where a computer randomly picks a number between the minimum and maximum choices available. Think of it as rolling dice. For this to be possible, I have to break down every creative choice into a numerical chance. Simple, right? I have to figure out how to choose instruments, choose notes, adjust the volume, pick effects, as well as somehow pick the settings of those chosen effects. Where do I even start? I think a good starting point would be selecting instruments, as you can't really make a song without them. What I decided on doing was creating a pool of 25 different instruments to pull from, then roll for each instrument that I will use. In this pool of 25 instruments, I tried to make them as diverse as possible, including various instruments from different genres such as bongos, multiple synths, harp, piano, and even a xylophone. By choosing these various instruments, it decreases my chances of rolling something silly like 5 xylophones in a row and having to make an all xylophone song. Wait, I might be onto something with the xylophones. I guess we'll just have to leave it to RNG. Now that we have a pool of instruments, we have to figure out how many we're going to use. Because there's a pool of 25 choices, we're going to roll 1 in 25. Alright, 6. Now it's time to roll our instruments. Honestly, not a bad selection. I'm just happy we got some percussion, some melodic stuff, and even pads. So now that we have our instruments chosen, it's time to throw them in our DAW of choice. In this case, it's Logic. However, we have one problem. We have to figure out what synth we're going to use, since there's a lot to choose from. So what we're going to do is count all the presets, which is 27. And it looks like we're going to be using the 22nd one. Cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Ooh, it's blue. Fun. Next up, I can tackle how I can use RNG to choose music notes for the instruments I just chose. Luckily for me, there are things called MIDI generators. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, which are pretty much digitized notes that a computer can read. What's cool about MIDI is that they themselves don't create sounds, but when applied to an instrument, these instruments read the notes and then plays the MIDI notes. It's pretty much like sheet music for a computer. So let's take a look at a MIDI generator. We have a choice in length, which is the amount of musical bars it will make, a root note, which is the main note that a chord is built. This is a good feature since it's going to help keep the melody cohesive and give it a decent shot at sounding okay. The scale option will give the generator a pool of notes to choose from, and the style option will give it some flavor. We're going to take these 4 choices and roll to see which one we're going to use. The length has 4 choices, the root note has 37, scales 96, making it the biggest pool of numbers to pull from so far, and the style's 11 as we're only going to be using the free options. Our 1 out of 4 length roll is 2. 1 out of 37 root note roll is 6. 1 out of 96 scale roll is 67. And 1 out of 11 style roll is 5. This makes our song 16 bars in length with the root note of F2 and the Mixolydian scale with the Japanese style. And now it's time to generate 6 of these. Once I've got my MIDI notes, I plug them in order of generation, meaning the first one I generated went to track 1 and so on. I'm kind of curious how this sounds already. That's actually not bad. I really like the synth pads and the wood blocks. Now that our instruments have notes, I can start mixing them. Mixing is the process of adjusting volumes, adding effects, cleaning up or accenting sounds with equalizers, and so on. Pretty much make your ideas shine. I typically start with volume balancing, then group together tracks with buses and add effects like compression, then EQ my tracks, and finish off with adding individual effects on tracks to add flavor. But for this experiment, RNG does not care, so let's see what order we get. Track effects. Okay, So the thing that I usually do last. What I call track effects is the process of applying effects on individual instruments rather than grouping them with a bus and applying it to that group. I typically leave this till last because I feel the effects charm is retained better over the mixing process, but not today. Much like the instrument choices, I created a pool of 6 effects I could use. I think this is a nice general selection of time and gain based effects. So now we have to roll for how many of the effects we're going to use. 2. Now we're choosing effects, reverb and distortion. And the reverb will go on track 2, distortion 1. Okay, let's do just that. So we're going to put on our reverb on the wood blocks. And then we're going to put the distortion on the 808 drum machine. So now we've ran into a similar problem as we did with the synth pads. Luckily, we can do the same method to solve this problem. We're just going to count all the presets and let the computer decide. The reverb itself had a whopping 636 presets that I could use, while the distortion effect offered 133. Alright, back to the gambling simulator and see what we get for our next stage. Volume. Okay. For this, our minimum decibel amount is -99 and max +6. Let's see what we get. And there's our volume. Yeah, we really didn't need to hear the shaker synth pads anyways, right? Time to pick the next stage. Alright, let's roll these lovely numbers. EQ, which means bus effects are the last stage. An equalizer, also referred to as an EQ, is used for dipping and boosting frequencies to make sure everything fits together and there aren't really any clashing frequencies. I've always looked at it like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, but I get to cut the pieces to make them fit how I want. Moving along in our mixing process, it's time to do EQ. We're going to take the maximum amount of presets, which is 148, and see what we get. Alright, now we're on the home stretch. This leads us to our final mixing stage, bus effects. As I mentioned earlier, bus effects are the process of grouping a set of instruments and applying an effect to that group. So let's do just that. For our bus effects, we're first going to roll 1 out of 6 to see how many buses we're going to need. Okay, 2. And now we're going to roll 6 times to see which tracks go on bus 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now bus 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now that our tracks are grouped in buses, we have to figure out what effects are going to go on those buses. Bus 1 will get distortion and bus 2 will get compression. You probably know the drill right now. We're going to take the max amount of presets and roll to see what preset we're actually going to use. And the absolute last thing for this project, we got to figure out the loudness of our buses. We're just going to apply the same numbers as we did for our volume balancing. And with that done, I think it's time to hear the finished thing. Honestly, not bad considering all the randomness. I'm honestly just happy it's not clipping. It's kind of a shame the pads and shakers are kind of non-existent as the volume is very low, but I think my favorite part about this track is the distorted woodblocks. This was my first attempt at something unique like this and would love to flesh out the rules for future attempts. I think next time I might try to export more MIDIs to form multiple verses to actually create a song rather than a loop. I also realized I completely forgot about panning, so I'll be sure to include that in the mixing stages next time. I'd also love to hear any suggestions anyone has on how I can improve this process, and maybe even call it a mistake I made as this is the first try. The purpose of this video is to see if this was even possible, but also to discover a cool technique never thought of before, just like those cool distorted wood blocks. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and if you've enjoyed this music experiment and want to see more, consider liking and subscribing. Thanks!